Hey y'all, Brandy here with Duly Noted. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to use some of the inks that we discussed in the previous video. We're going to do a variety of techniques with them. We're going to do stamping, ink blending, and some heat embossing. So if you're interested in that, let's get into it. Today's video is heavily influenced by Jennifer McGuire. She has her own channel here on YouTube, and she is an amazing person and crafter and creator, and I encourage you to check her out. What I'm doing here is I have a photopolymer stamp that I've never used before, and I'm just rubbing my hands on it to condition it. That helps get any of the manufacturing residue that may be on it, gets that off so that it will accept the ink a little better. Some companies have stamp conditioning erasers and tools. You can use your hand, you can use just a plain white eraser. Like I said, it just helps the stamp accept the ink a little better. I'm using a Tim Holtz platform, stamping platform here. This just helps me be able to stamp in the exact same spot multiple times should I need to. There are several different kinds of tools like this out on the market. This just happens to be the one that I have. It was a little more cost friendly for me at the time. There are MISTI tools, and you'll see one of those in this video later. I have a mini MISTI. This is the tool that I use if I'm using bigger stamps. Right now I am prepping the surface because we are doing some heat embossing. So I'm going to stamp with a Versamark ink, which is a clear sticky ink, and it is going to hold on to the embossing powder. That is that ink pad right there. You saw me put a powder on this paper and kind of brush it around. That tool is an EK Success powder tool. I've had it for a very, very, very long time. In fact, all of the bristles are gone. That's why I use like an old dry paint brush to kind of move that powder around. This powder helps to prevent static so that your powder doesn't stick absolutely everywhere. It only sticks where you apply the ink. I am using a pressing tool, a stamping tool from a person I got from Etsy. I believe it's called a stamping bug. I believe. And I have this big one, and that's what I use when I use this Tim Holtz stamping platform. And then I have a smaller one when I use my mini MISTI. It just helps me apply even pressure and keeps my wrists and that from hurting. So you can see that there's ink there. It's just very, very subtle, but that is what is going to hold on to our embossing powder. I'm using a gold embossing powder from Ranger today, and it is essentially like really finely ground pieces of plastic, essentially. And I am just spreading that all over my paper and my image, and I'm doing that over a coffee filter. A lot of people just use a scrap piece of paper and then they can funnel it back in. I use a coffee filter. They're really cheap. I can use them over and over and over again. They don't take up a lot of space. That's just what I use, but there are, like I said, a lot of creators just use paper. I'm just funneling that back into the pot so that I can use that later. I'm going to heat up my heat tool off to the side. That is how I'm going to actually heat set this. Now, if I have pieces of that embossing powder that are where I don't want them to be, I just take a really small, thin brush that's dry, and I just brush those away. And right there you see I brushed a little too much away. I'm going to go back and apply that powder and fix that. This is the embossing tool. You know that your embossing powder is set when it becomes shiny and smooth. If it's still grainy and dull, it's not heat set, so you need to go back and hit that. As soon as it turns, I move the gun away from it. You can overheat this embossing powder. Any embossing powder you can overheat. When you do, it's almost like it melts into the paper. So you see this beautiful shine, that's what you're looking for. We're going to get into the stenciling. So I have this is a NiCapo mat. It is just a sticky mat that I've cut down. And we are going to be using a stencil from Pinkfresh Studio. This is a stencil, stamp, and die combo. This is Painted Daisies. All of their stencils come with a colored image on the back. This gives you an idea on how many colors are in there, how many stencils you have, and gives you some inspiration on kind of what color combinations to use. This doesn't mean you have to use those exact ones, it just gives you some ideas. I'm going to be using a lot of positively saturated inks from Simon Says Stamp today, and then I'm using one from the Stamp Market. That one is Curry. I purchased these blending brushes, and this is how we're going to be applying the ink. I purchased these off of Amazon. Lots of stamping companies have their own version of these blending brushes. These look exactly the same to me as perhaps ones from Simon Says Stamp. They work beautifully, and I am not a very gentle ink blender, and I haven't had any problem with these bristles coming out or the brushes like falling apart, the handles bending, or the brushes falling apart. They have been a wonderful purchase. In fact, I have 2 sets of them, and I really, really like them. So in order to help me when I'm picking colors and trying to figure out what kind of color palette I want to use and where I'm going to be applying the ink, I usually write on the stencil some guides for me. So I refer back to the colored printed image on the packaging, and then I can write in what color is this, what color is related to this, where this color is going to be put down on the image. And that helps me know a little bit better about where I'm going to be doing this ink blending, where it's going to appear. There is etched lines inside these stencils, but I just write in permanent marker a little like note to myself on there. I have lined up the stencil, and I have essentially created a hinge with that purple tape. This is satin masking tape from Altenew, and I really like it. You can reuse it multiple times. So I am applying this yellow Curry ink from the Stamp Market, and I'm using a yellow blending brush to do that. And I am just applying this ink in circular motions in all of these open areas on this stencil. I really do like Pinkfresh Studio, their stamp stencil and die combinations. Some of them even come with hot foil plates now. I just really like them. I think I'm not a big into coloring, and so this is a really quick and easy way for me to add coloring without coloring, without breaking out with markers or colored pencils or that kind of thing. So I take that stencil, the first stencil, and I lift it up like a hinge, and then I slip in the second stencil, and I line that stencil up with the corners of the previous stencil. And that just helps me line things up a little faster. I still fiddle a little bit and, get things perfectly lined up. But that just helps me kind of get them lined up easier without having to sit there and fiddle with alignment. You saw me there with a very dirty looking rag. That is a flower sackcloth. I picked this trick up from Amy R. from Prairie Paper and Ink. She uses one of those, and I just rub the blending brush on there to get rid of the excess ink. That just quote unquote cleans it so that I can have a truer color when I apply the next color. So if you remember from our previous video, we talked about how these particular dye inks are translucent, which means you can see through them. So as I am laying this second stencil's color down, I am being aware that some of that is overlapping with the first color we laid down. So you are going to achieve a third color within this stencil because you are overlapping 2 colors that you can see through, particularly on these little flowers. You can see that there. I'll eventually hold this up to the camera, and you can see that there are more than 6 colors for the 6 stencils. Because these inks are translucent in layer and are see-through, you end up achieving multiple colors. Now that can be good and bad. If you're not conscious of the colors you're using, you can make mud. So be conscious of the colors that you're laying on top of one another, unless, it's a fall themed color palette like this one is, and brown is not a bad deal. I'm going to speed through the rest of this. When I'm ink blending, I go clockwise and counterclockwise. Quite often these stencils have very fine detailed areas. And so if you go clockwise and counterclockwise, you're able to get into kind of the nooks and crannies of those dies, those stencils a little better. As you look, because I have that hinge, I'm able to kind of lift this up and check it and see if I like the color. Now, to get this paper off of the mat, I peel the mat away from the paper. That keeps the paper from bending and warping. And as you can see here, that heat embossing has resisted the ink, so it hasn't colored that gold heat embossing. This is how I clean these stencils. If I was using a paste or something like that, I would clean them right away. But because this is just an ink, I can take that same flour sackcloth and I just spray some stamp cleaner on top of it and wipe it off. I wipe off the front and sometimes the back of it needs it. That gets it clean and it's ready to use the next time. We're going to take the coordinating die and cut this out. Now, if you look, you can see that there is ink outside of that stamped and embossed image. Don't worry about that. We do want to keep this negative piece. So we have this beautiful die cut image, and we're going to keep that, but we're also going to keep that negative piece. I have about 5 of these 5x7 pieces of cardstock. They're all cut to the same size, and I am just lining them up using that negative piece from the colored piece. And we are going to cut 5 of these out, all from the same exact spot. Now, because I'm essentially trying to cut through 2 pieces of cardstock, it's not going to cut all the way out, but that's okay. It's cut enough that we have an impression, so we can go back and cut that out completely in a minute. But we're going to go through and run this forward and backward and get a good impression. Now we've got just the die and the paper. We don't have the die, the negative, and the new paper we're trying to cut through. We just have the die and the paper. And we're going to be able to cut this out completely this time because it's not trying to cut through multiple layers. We're going to do this, like I said, 4 or 5 times, and we're going to keep all of those negative pieces. These positive pieces, I'm just going to slide them in the back of the stamp packaging so that if I ever want to make more of these cards or use this particular stamp set again, I already have those die cut and they're ready to go. I have a piece of clear acetate right here. I have just cut this down so that it will cover the back of this opening here. We're going to be making a interactive card. We're going to be making a shaker card today. And so we need to be able to make sure that our card base is the same size as these papers as these die cut panels. So I'm just going to glue all of these panels together, and then on one of them I'm going to glue this acetate to it. I use liquid glue for this. It gives me a chance to kind of wiggle these papers into place to get them to line up correctly so that there isn't gapping or the finer, just so it lines up better. It just gives me a little bit of wiggle room to get these things lined up right. Once I have it lined up right and I'm pleased with how it looks, I'm going to lay something heavy on top of it just so it can dry as I apply the other glue to the other panels and get them glued together. I like to use my die cutting plates for that. They're nice and heavy and they're flat, so they are good for weighting these things down. Now we're going to glue the acetate. When I'm gluing the acetate, I try to keep the glue a little bit further away from the middle just so that it doesn't seep out and kind of mar the finish of the acetate. Now we are ready to glue the acetate piece that has the acetate to it to the rest of the stack of negative die cuts. So it's going to be a piece of cardstock, your acetate, and then 3 more pieces of cardstock. What I'm going to do is I'm going to I've applied some liquid glue again so that I can have a little bit of wiggle room, and I'm going to lay this kind of inside that negative piece, and I'm going to line it up with the card base. This is a 5x7 card base, side folding. And I'm just going to lay it in there and let it dry. So now this colored panel is attached directly to our card base. Now it's time to add, Carissa Wiley calls these her shaker guts. This is the time to add your shaker bits. I'm using glitter here. You can use flat sequins. You can use confetti. You can use seed beads. Something that is not super thick because we don't have these walls crazy thick, but there is a little bit of height to them. So I'm just trying to spread this glitter out so that it's not in a pile, so that things can adhere a little bit better. So we're going to achieve kind of an inlaid look with this shaker card. I have some Instant Dimension foam tape, also from Altenew, and I'm going to create a bit of a well for these shaker bits, this glitter, to sit inside. It is important, very, very important, so you don't make a mess absolutely everywhere, to make sure that every side of this tape touches. If there is a gap anywhere, whatever you have inside your shaker card is going to fall out. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants, all of these awesome shaker bits to fall out. So make sure that as you're going around, every single side touches. There are no gaps. I'm going to remove this backer paper, and then we are going to lay this on top of this the colored panel with the glitter. Now, y'all, in full disclosure, I totally messed this up. I didn't get it lined up right. I should have put a little bit of glue on that foam tape so that I had just a millisecond of wiggle room, but I didn't. And so, as you can see, we get this beautiful shaking, and it looks really pretty. You can still see the colors. It's really pretty. Okay, so I should have put glue on this. I didn't. And I tried to fix it, and I made it worse. So this is how we're really going to fix it. I ended up taking off that colored panel completely from the card. I just ripped it off. And now I'm applying, and I trimmed it down on all the edges. It looks gosh awful, but we will fix it. I cut another one of those panels, and I made sure it was exactly lined up right. And now I'm just going to line that center panel up on the card base and adhere that down. And now I'm going to take another piece of that negative die cut cardstock and lay it on top. And this makes it line up right, and it looks so much better than the terrible, terrible thing I had before. So there is the finished shaker card. You have this beautiful inlaid look, and it looks somewhat finished on the sides. Here I am taking a Funky Flowers stamp set from Inkadinkado, and I am trying to figure out my my sentiment. So I take the packaging and I lay it across and try to figure out which one I want and where I want to put it. I am taking a sentiment banner die, and I'm going to cut that out using my little Sizzix Sidekick and cut that out. Now I'm going to heat emboss this. This is a mini Misty. This is another version of a stamp positioner, allowing you to be able to stamp multiple times in the same spot. I have one of those NICAP sticky mats cut down to fit inside of here. I'm just going to align my stamp, pick it up with the door of that mini Misty once I have it lined up where I want it. And then we're going to do the same process. We are going to treat it with our anti-static powder tool, rub that around, put our heat embossing Versamark ink on there, sprinkle on our gold embossing powder, and then heat set it with our heat gun. Now I'm just going to adhere this flat to the card, and I liked it at the bottom of the card. Now, you can tell me in the comments below what you think. I thought it needed something on the outside, so I chose to put some gold sequins on the outside of the card. You tell me what you think. Should I have left the sequins off? Do you like the addition of the sequins? Tell me what you think. But this is our completed shaker card. Again, this card took me less than an hour to make. It took me longer to edit this video than it took to actually make this card. And I am pairing this card with a 5x7 gray envelope. And I purchased these envelopes from Hobby Lobby. So there you have it. It was a longer video for me, so thank you for sticking with me. I appreciate you. I hope you learned something, and I hope you felt inspired. If you did, I hope you will hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon so you don't miss any videos that I upload, and you'll be notified each time. And I hope you hit that like button if you did. And then if you have any questions or comments, I would love to hear from you, and I do my best to always reply. So in the meantime, I hope you have a great day, and we will catch you next time.